Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mangs, and today I welcome you guys to the start of a brand new Patreon Q&A episode. It's been a while since we did one of these, so I figured it was about time. At the start of the month I asked you all to submit questions, and we got about 15 or so from my Patreon supporters, and I'm gonna go into as much detail as I can for each one. Again, you don't have to ask me about Fire Emblem on the show, you can pretty much ask me about anything, but most of the questions I get tend to be Fire Emblem oriented. So without further ado, let's just jump into the first one. So the first question of the day comes in from Sketchy Chicken, aka the next PME Lord, or at least he seems to think he is, and he asks, when will the next PME be in development, and which Fire Emblem will it be based on? If I have to do another split, I'm going to cry. So, if you just subbed to my channel recently and you don't know what a PME is, it basically stands for Pick My Edits. It's a heavily modified playthrough of a Fire Emblem game where you basically let your fans decide the edits. I've done, I think in total 5 PMEs. I did one of Fire Emblem 4, one of Fire Emblem 6, one of Fire Emblem 7, and then we did 2 different PMEs of Fire Emblem 8. It started off as sort of like a somewhat modified playthrough of a standard game with some memes sprinkled in here and there, and it ended up becoming a, I mean, what are we even gonna call the previous PME? It was like a cringy OC fanfic based around a skeletal structure of Fire Emblem 8 with like, it was basically a new game, honestly. I don't think it's even fair to call it a PME anymore, because it just turned into a game of its own. So it has sort of evolved over the years, I suppose. So I did say at the end of the last one that I needed a big break from the PME projects as a whole, because it took us over a year to develop the final one, and it cost me a lot of headache. It was a lot of work. We had to really haul ass to get it over with. Now, I probably will do another PME in the future. I want to wait for the Tree Houses hype to die down completely. It's still going relatively strong. It's starting to fizzle out a little bit. Like, I think we're just getting over like the massive Tree Houses honeymoon, and we're starting to sort of get back to normal now. And I think for as long as Tree Houses is relevant, I don't really want to start up another PME. But I will say that if I am to do another PME, it's probably going to be based on Fire Emblem 8 again. And the reason for this is, I mean, first of all, you really want to hack the Game Boy Advance games, because they are by far the easiest to hack. There's a lot of resources available to them, and people just know more about GBA ROM hacking than they do about any other games. In particular, Fire Emblem 8 is the easiest because it has the most tools available to it. It's by far the least buggy to hack, and it just has, like, I mean, we got things like leadership stars now, and skills, and tons of patches that you can add on to really make it a much more enjoyable experience. Fire Emblem 6, for example, while easier to hack than some of the other games, can be a buggy mess sometimes and very hard to work with. At least that's what people I've worked with told me. I don't really know much about hacking myself personally, but I've worked with a lot of people who's helped me create these PMEs, and that's what they tell me. It would honestly be really cool to do a Tracia hack, especially now that Project Exile is out, although, again, you're kind of limited in what you can do with a Tracia hack. In most cases, I'd probably just be able to swap out the playable characters and the bosses, give them unique names, and maybe like unique growth rates and classes and skills. I'm not really sure if we could modify the text that much due to how the translation patch works, but it would certainly be fun to try, although I'd need to get in touch with people who know a lot about Tracia hacking, and those people are kind of hard to come by. I do know a few that would be willing to help me out with such a project, but I can't really say for sure if they would want to do it like for real. Path of Radiance would also be a lot of fun to do a PME of, but again, we run into the same problem that it's kind of limited what you can do with the ROM itself, and also there's not that many people out there who knows a lot about Path of Radiance hacking. I mean, there's some for sure, but whether or not they have time to actually jump on a huge PME project is another question entirely. So it would probably be FE8 again, because it is just by far the easiest to hack. And how we'd go about doing it, I really don't know. Probably something similar to the previous one, where we have custom-made characters created by the fans, send them in, and we'll make some sort of cringy story. It would be fun, I think, if we did something akin to Void Split's Our Adventure, where we let various people design various maps. If you don't know, Void Split's Our Adventure is a Fire Emblem hack in the community that's sort of created collectively by a bunch of hackers who each made their own level in order to create a hack really quickly. I think they made it in like a month or something. And I think something similar would be fun to do for the PME, where we basically get in touch with a whole bunch of map designers, and we let them design a map each for the PME, and we just like string them together, add playable characters. I'll see where it takes us. It's never that easy though, of course. It's always more work than you think. But I think once the Tree Houses hype has died down for good, and we start to get back to the same level that we've been before Tree Houses, I think I might look into announcing another PME, because they are a lot of fun to make. I know a lot about directing one now, so I think the next time we go into one, there's definitely like some things I will avoid, for sure, which should make things a little bit easier on me. But I hope that answers your question. The next question comes in from Death Star, and he asks a question that is sort of answered itself, because keep in mind these were asked at the start of the month. He asks, do you plan to do any more IronMan runs after FE6? And of course the answer is yes. I've done FE7, FE8, I failed all 3, so that was fun. Next one I'm gonna do is Tracia 776. I might have started already by the time this comes out, not really sure how quickly Jake is going to edit it. Yeah, it's, I'm probably going to Iron Man every game in the series that is suitable for Iron Manning, I think, because I really love this. This is really rekindled my passion for Fire Emblem in a big way. I really, really love Iron Manning Fire Emblem. It is absolutely an amazing feeling. I feel like this is almost how the games were intended to be played, because it really feels great to do it, even though I'm not very good at it. So, he also asks, do you plan on doing more reverse recruitments? Now, I don't think I've ever done a reverse recruitment run on the channel. Like, I really thought hard. I went back in my mind and I thought through every single Fire Emblem hacked playthrough that I've done, and I've done a lot of randomizers, but I have never done a reverse recruitment to my knowledge. I think I'd remember if I did. Now, I did co-host Mekkah's FE6 reverse recruitment, which was a lot of fun, which is May What You Remember, but that wasn't actually me who played, that was Mekkah. Would I ever consider doing a reverse recruitment run? Yeah, I actually would. Funnily enough, I actually considered streaming the reverse recruitment patch of Order of the Crimson Arm. It actually came out not too long ago, and it, you know, considering there is a Carl Lord there as well, or Corel Lord, that actually sounds like a lot of fun. I think you get the mage Edwin or something. What's his name? The guy with the sage with the busted growth rates. So you kind of get sort of something similar to FE6, where you get a really busted lord after a while. That is, except that he's really hard to level up initially. But yeah, no, I think reverse recruitment runs are very interesting. FE6 I think is one of the best ones to do it in because of Corel and how much fun he makes the game. I think a Radiant Dawn reverse recruitment run would actually be a lot of fun, so I think I would consider doing that if anything, but it's certainly something that I'm considering. So the next question comes in from Chris G, and his question is sort of similar to the previous one. He asks, are you interested in doing more Iron Man runs of the newer Fire Emblem games, Echoes for example? So while I did answer this sort of in the last one, I think I can go more in depth about the later Fire Emblem games and how appropriate they would be to Iron Man run. Now, I think I'm going to end up Iron Manning most of the games, as I said. It's something that I really enjoy doing. And the question I have in regards to specifically Echoes is, would an Iron Man run involve not using the turn wheel? Because, again, you get so many charges of Mila's turn wheel, especially towards the late game. I don't actually think you'll ever load a save unless Alm or Celica dies. Because if they die, of course, it's a game over. You don't get the ability to activate the turn wheel like you do in Tree Houses when Byleth dies, for example. So that's something that I would probably have to wonder about. And I'd probably say no, because Mila's turn wheel, I consider it kind of like loading a battle save, and that's something that you technically aren't allowed to do in Iron Man runs. So I think I would just ban Mila's turn wheel like altogether, which would actually make for a pretty damn interesting playthrough of Echoes. Now, the thing about the newer Fire Emblem games is that I have a lot less experience with them in general. Like, my expertise kind of lies in the Game Boy Advance games. Yeah, come on, bring on the jokes. We know. But sort of the games that I played a lot are like the old school Fire Emblem games. I played them multiple times. I feel more comfortable Iron Manning them. Echoes I've actually only ever played once, and it was on the channel. I actually haven't gone back to it at all. Fates, I think, is probably the newer Fire Emblem game that I have the most experience with because of all the coring quests that I've done. Coring quests, like, a lot of people will probably say, like, oh, why don't you Iron Man a coring quest? Well, coring quests are by definition Iron Mans because I don't reset when I lose a corin most of the time. There's some corins that usually become so popular that I end up resetting for them, but generally I don't reset when a corin dies. And it's, I think just playing Fate's Conquests, maybe on hard. I don't think I'd do Lunatic Conquest, because I actually, funnily enough to this day, I've actually never beaten vanilla Conquest Lunatic with just the standard units. That's a playthrough I'm going to have to do in the future, I think. But
I think Hard Conquest would probably work. I don't want to play Birthright and Revelation again. I think they're really bad games, and I don't want to touch them anymore. Awakening Iron Man probably would be kind of fun. I think Lunatic is too hard. I think it would probably... You see, the problem I have with Awakening is that I think hard is too easy, but I think Lunatic is too hard. I would love to have a difficulty between hard and Lunatic, and that would probably be fun to Iron Man. Although I think Iron Manning is a lot harder because generally you're more punished when you make mistakes. You can't just load a save when a good unit dies. So I think hard Awakening would probably be appropriate for Iron Man. We'll see. As far as like Iron Manning Tree Houses, I think that once I'm done with Golden Dare and maybe Church Route, I'm not really sure how I'm going to play Church Route, I think that it would probably be appropriate to take a bit of a break from Tree Houses and go back to some of the other games for a while, and then maybe come back to Tree Houses and then Iron Man it on stream once I'm done Iron Manning a lot of the other ones. At least that's how I think I would like to do things. So yeah, I hope that answered your question. So the next question comes in from Exopas, and he actually has multiple questions, so we'll read them out one by one, and I'll reply to them as we go. He starts out by saying, "Hey, I'm Mangsipu, got a couple of questions for you. So I really feel like the Crimson route feels underwhelming and unfinished compared to the other routes. What do you think it could have been done to make it better?" So I'll reply to this question before we move on. So, obviously, they could have just added more content to it, but it's not as simple as that, of course. When dealing with like budget constraints, it's very hard to critique something because they probably had no choice but to cut a lot of content from Tree Houses. Crimson Rose isn't the only route that feels a little unfinished. Blue Lions also has a lot of seemingly cut content that never made it into the game's launch. We know there are a lot of unused battle quotes in that route, for example. We have choices that feel odd, that don't really amount to much, that hints at a route split being in the works. You know, when they ask you if you want to go west or east, there are definitely a lot of hints that a bunch of content simply did not get ready in time for the launch date. Despite the game being pushed 1 year ahead of its actual release, they do seem to have struggled with their budget. And when it comes to that, it's very hard to actually know what to do about it. I mean, at the end of the day, your ambitions are far greater than your actual resources when it comes to game design, and in the end, you probably are going to have to cut away some content. Each Fire Emblem game in the series have some unused content that you can find in the game's files if you know where to look. There's a nice thread on Serenus Forest about that called Unused Content, where it shows each of the games there's like unused maps, unused portraits, unused dialogue. It's all over the place. Now, what I think they could have done with Crimson Rose, it may not be a very popular answer, but I think they could have cut it entirely, and they could have included it as free DLC in one of the upcoming waves. That way, they would have enough resources to actually flesh out the route completely and make it feel more relevant. So, by the way, some spoilers here for the upcoming DLC. Jump to this current timestamp if you don't want to hear about it. I don't want to spoil anyone unintentionally, or intentionally, I guess. In the next DLC wave, we are going to get Jaritza, aka the Death Knight, as a playable character, and it says he's only available in some routes. Now, I very much think that he might be exclusive to Crimson Rose, because, of course, when you play in Crimson Rose, he shows up as a green unit. So I think that they're going to probably add some content to Crimson Flower to make it feel more fleshed out and more interesting, and I hope they add a lot more than just that. So that's going to be very interesting. His second question is, who's your favorite Tree Houses character and who's your least favorite? So, I must admit, I haven't gotten to know all the Golden Dare characters yet. I am currently playing the route with Jazz, but there are a lot of characters in there that I don't necessarily know as well as I should yet, so I can't really answer much about the Golden Dare, but so far, my favorite character is Ferdinand von Eyre. I'm using him in all 3 of my playthroughs. I think he's very interesting. He was the first character I made a spotlight on. I love the Ferdinand von Eyre meme. He's just very quotable, very memeable. He has a unique look, especially post-time skip, he looks really good. And I don't know, I just really like him. He's just such a cool character. And he's good too. I think he's a good unit. My least favorite character so far is probably Ash. I think that Ash is, he has a very good design, and he's very easy to like, and he's much loved in the community. But I think that every single one of Ash's supports are boring as fuck. Like, every time I watch an Ash support, I am bored to tears. I don't think any of his supports are particularly interesting. There might be some I haven't watched yet, maybe some of his cross supports with the Golden Dare students that I may not have seen yet, so maybe there's a couple out there that I haven't seen yet that are good, but I've watched all of his supports with the Blue Lions crew, and they did not impress me. Every time he's on screen, he's just... he's... I don't really know what it is. Like, he's very jovial, very, very innocent. I always have to pay attention whenever he's involved in a support, and that is not a good sign. I'm not saying he's a bad character. I understand he's very popular and a lot of people like him, but for me personally, he is my least favorite character so far. Also, he finishes off with, also special thanks to Jake, your designer, seeing his work for you and speaking with him made me inspired to try my hand at designing, and it's been really nice. Thank you so much. I'm sure Jake will really like hearing that. And yeah, that's awesome, man. I think if you want designer tips, or if you want advice on how to get better at it, Jake would be the guy to speak to. So I think you're on the right track there. So yeah, thank you so much, Exopass. So the next questions comes in from Gorgonzola, and he asks 4 questions actually. So as always, we'll answer them one by one. He starts off by asking, how would you personally write a protagonist? So this question can be phrased in 2 different ways. Are you talking about a protagonist in a Fire Emblem game, or are you talking about a protagonist in a book? Because the 2 would be very different. My answer would differ. I'm just going to assume that you're talking about a Fire Emblem game here. Now, I would like to say that I don't have any writing experience. I don't consider myself a very good writer. But one thing I do have is I have a lot of experience reading. I read like a book every week. I am attracted to fantasy and science fiction. But I have also read some biographies and stuff like that. And I would consider myself like a well-read person. I've read a ton of books in my lifetime, and I hope to read a lot more. So I would say I probably have a little bit of an insight in terms of writing, but I have never actually tried writing anything myself. But a protagonist, I think the most important thing that a protagonist needs to be relatable is they need to have flaws. And I think this is why I lash out so hard against Mary Sue type characters in games and media, and also against edgelords, because if there's one thing they tend to lack, it's flaws. And I think in Fire Emblem, most of the main characters in Fire Emblem games don't tend to be very interesting. It's more so if they're attached to a good game, they can be good characters. Take Sigurd, for example, in Genealogy of the Holy War. He does definitely have some flaws. He's a little impulsive, I guess. He does things without thinking, and he's a little naive, I'd say. But those aren't really super defined flaws. He is mostly, for the most part, treated as a pretty, chivalrous and good character. And he's sort of just swept up into the politics of Jugdrall and kind of get involved in events outside of his own control. He doesn't really, I wouldn't really say that his only real mistakes is just, falling for the wrong woman in Deidre, which just ended up causing a whole bunch of problems for him. But again, yeah, I think you gotta have a character with flaws. In a Fire Emblem game, maybe less so, because in a Fire Emblem game, I personally like it when games focus a little bit more on the world and the continent around them. This is why I like Binding Blade so much. Despite Roy being an absolutely boring character, I like the politics and the intrigue of Alib, and how you travel all over the continent. You get to see all the different continents interact with each other and stuff like that. I am much more attracted to world building than I am towards like personal struggles. And so a protagonist in a Fire Emblem game doesn't necessarily need to be super complex for me. They just need to be attached to a good world with good writing involved in it. But if I were to make a protagonist in a Fire Emblem game, if I were to make a hack of my own and have a character in that, I think I would probably be inspired to make a character that is a little bit rash and reckless, kind of like how I play, kind of does things without thinking them through, and this causes him to, end up in kind of sticky situations that he needs to get himself out of. I think that a protagonist definitely should be moral and good, but I personally would like to see a bit more of a gray character. One thing I do miss a lot in Fire Emblem is a character that's made mistakes in the past. I think this is one of the things I like about Hector in FE7. I wouldn't say he has like a troubled past or anything, but his reckless behavior has definitely earned him a reputation at court, which makes it hard for him to be taken seriously in Ostia, and I like that. I think that if I were to write a Fire Emblem main character, I'd probably do something similar, where I'd write in a character that had done some pretty stupid things in the past and were maybe trying to atone a little bit for those things and is trying hard to prove himself, but is kind of struggling, fighting against the reputation he costs. And, you know, I'd throw in maybe some dark stuff in there. You know, maybe he was a criminal. Maybe he did some stuff that he's very ashamed of. Maybe he killed someone. I think that the more flaws and the more layers you add on top of a main character, the better it can become. The most important part is that they're relatable. And if they're perfect, you know, Mary Sue's, that's very hard to do. So again, a little bit of a convoluted answer, but I hope it's what you were looking for. Yeah. Go to Gonzola then follows up with a second question, which is how would you personally write an antagonist? So I think that the most important thing an antagonist needs to have in a story is motivation. They need to have a goal. They need to have a reason for doing what they do. I think that, you know, an example that's very easy to make fun of is Fates and its horrible villains. Garen, Iago, and Hans. Oh my god. With Garen, I guess you can sort of understand his motivations because he's sort of possessed throughout the whole thing. But Iago and Hans, they're just evil for the sake of being evil, and it's really unappealing. Iago, I guess you could say he wants power, he's sort of like the evil advisor archetype, but Hans is just like evil for the sake of being evil. He just likes carnage, and that just makes him such an uninteresting villain. Now, there are some characters in Fire Emblem who just kill for the sake of killing and still manages to be interesting. Volter from Sacred Stones is a good example of this. I actually find Volter to be sort of an interesting villain, despite the fact that he just likes to kill things for the sake of killing. They somehow manage to make him sort of appealing. I think it's because he doesn't dominate the scene as much. You don't really see him much unless you play Erika's route, and even then, he doesn't really show up all that often, so when he does, he has sort of a presence. With Hans and Fates, I feel like every time he shows up, it's just, you go, oh, not this guy again, you know? So I think a villain needs motivation. They need a reason for doing the things they do. You can make them more or less evil. You can make them, you know, more of a gray. You can even make them moral in some way. Although I think the Camus archetype is a bit overdone at this point, and I don't think it's that appealing. But Arvis is a good example of a villain that just really makes a lot of sense. I think Edelgard in Tree Houses also makes a lot of sense. I think that it's just important that you know why a villain is doing what they do. And if you do that, they sort of write themselves almost, I think. I think you just gotta line up their motivations, and then their actions will automatically make sense and they'll be a lot more appealing. His third question is, what's your opinion on time travel and time-based powers being used in stories? I hate it. Most of the time, I think time travel is the laziest plot device you can use to tell stories. If you open up the dimensions of time travel and dimension hopping, you can pretty much write your story in whichever way you choose. I think that there are some forms of media that does this pretty well. Doctor Who is a good example of time travel done well. If you ever watched that series, there's like 1 million seasons. I haven't watched all of them, but the little I have watched of it, I really liked. So if time is like a central theme of your storytelling, I have certainly seen it done right. In Fire Emblem, I feel like time traveling and dimension hopping and, you know, the Outrealms and all that stuff is mostly just brought in as a convenient excuse to put characters in places they shouldn't be in. Heroes does this a lot, where it's basically like one giant hub where everyone can come together. It is sort of the premise on which the game is built upon, so I guess I can't really fault them too much for it. But I personally just think it's lazy. I think it's lazy storytelling. If you have the concept of time travel, you can always make up some reason as to why a character is there at any moment. You know, they travel there from another realm. You know, why is Laszlo, Inigo, and Laszlo and Inigo? Why is Laszlo, Severa, and Owain? Why are they in Fates? Because they travel there. Mysterious man brought them. You know, it's like you don't need any creativity. You don't need to line out a world in any meaningful way. You can take liberties and do whatever you want and put characters there just for the sake of having them there. I think it's weak. I think it's uncreative. I think it's lazy. And if it was up to me, we would not have stuff like that in Fire Emblem. But then again, I don't write the stories, so, you know, what can I do? And finally, his last question is, what's your take on canonical endings in stories with branching paths, like Tree Houses? I don't really have an opinion, honestly. I'm fine with it, I guess. I'm sorry for not having more of an interesting answer. But I gave pretty long answers to the 3 previous ones, so hopefully you're satisfied with that. Like, I gotta be honest, this is not one of my pet peeves or one of my gripes or really anything that I've really given a lot of thought. I think that canonical endings in stories with branching paths are fine. So yeah, hope that's okay. So the next question comes in from Ephraim. Sorry for getting you killed by Cormac. And he asks, if you had to pick a single word to describe each character in the Black Eagle and/or Blue Lion's house, what would they be? I like how you just included the 2 houses that I finished so far. So what I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to bring up the roster. I'm just going to give the first word that comes to mind. So hopefully this should be a little bit entertaining because I'm doing this on the fly. So Edelgard, hot. Hubert, creepy. Bernadetta, annoying. Caspar, boring. Dorothea, beautiful. Ferdinand, noble. Linhardt, sleepy. Petra, plain. Petra's a bit boring, I'm sorry. Anyway, let's move on to the Blue Lion's house. Dimitri, handsome. Dedu, tall. Annette, cute. Ash, annoying. Mercedes, weird sounding, but hot. That wasn't one word. Sylvain, cool. Felix, edgy. Ingrid, pretty. So yeah, that was the first word that came to mind with the characters, and I did it on the fly. So hopefully that's entertaining. The next question comes in from Joseph R, and he asks, what games other than Fire Emblem do you enjoy playing? So right now I am actually having a lot of fun with classic World of Warcraft. I was a big WoW geek growing up. Throughout my teenage years I played it religiously and raided through several expansions. So when Blizzard announced that they were doing classic WoW, I was, very happy about it. I leveled a Warlock to 60. I'm playing it a little bit on and off, nothing too serious. I don't really have time to, play an MMO super seriously, but I'm having a lot of fun with it. It's still as much fun as I remember it 15 years ago. Aside from that, I played the Witcher games. I really enjoyed those. I played the XCOM games on the channel. Civilization, is a big one. I have several playthroughs of Civilization up on the channel as well. There's a lot of other lesser known games that I've played that I really enjoy, such as Baldur's Gate, Planescape Torment, Neverwinter Nights. Probably a lot more than that. Lords of Magic is the first game I ever played as a child. I actually have 2 Let's Plays of it on the channel just for fun. I could probably list off a lot of other games at the moment, but right now I am mainly playing Classic WoW when I'm not working on YouTube. It's sort of my hobby. I don't want to make any videos for it. It's just my relaxation game. Whenever I log into Classic WoW, I want to turn on a podcast and just turn my brain off and not think. That's pretty much what I do, So the next question comes in from Nexus, and he says, hey Mangs, I was just wondering, would you be interested in a Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn Remaster collection? Also, what do you plan to do once you hit 80k subs? I would love a Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn Remaster collection, absolutely. I'm not really sure, are you asking me if I want it? Because you say remaster collection. I'm not really sure how you're phrasing this question. Are you saying that you're sitting on 2 games and you would like to send them to me? Or are you wondering if I would like Radiant Dawn or Path of Radiance remastered into one game? Not really sure based on how you phrased this question. If it's the first one, if you want to send me a copy of Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn, fuck yeah, send me a message on Discord, I'd love it. If you're wondering if I would like them remastered into one game, I think that it would be a very long game. This is a very popular thing to suggest, along with FE6 and FE7 being put into one game. I actually don't think it would work. I think that if you want to remaster Path of Radiance or Radiant Dawn, they need to be their separate games, because they're too long. Radiant Dawn in and of itself is a massive game, and having them spliced into one game sounds nice on paper, but I think it would be a bit too huge of an undertaking. It would certainly make transfers and the like easier, and it would you could connect the 2 games' stories a little bit more, but I don't think it would be a very good idea. As for what I plan to do when I hit 80k subs, I honestly still don't know. So I was going to do a Mangs dungeon similar to, you know, what I did at 50k, but I think we've decided to push that probably over to 100k because it's a pretty big thing, and it's not that it's going to take a long time to finish, but I didn't want to rush the development, so I sort of put it off. Probably be some sort of shitpost, I imagine. Maybe a stream of some kind where I do something funny. We'll see. I probably should make up my mind soon because I'm probably gonna hit 80k this month. So we'll see how that goes. So the next question comes in from Sam, and he asks, what is your biggest disagreement you have with Mekkah on a Fire Emblem game, mechanic, etc., and why? So, me and Mekkah, we've had several lengthy arguments over Discord regarding the design philosophy of Shuso Kaga. Shuso Kaga, is that how you pronounce it? I don't really know. The guy who designed the first 5 Fire Emblem games. He's basically looked upon as the father of Fire Emblem. And in particularly, we've talked a lot about Tracia 776, its mechanics, whether they're good or not, and basically if Kaga had the right idea when designing the game. It was the last game he worked on. Shortly after it was released, he left the company. We don't really know why he left, but I personally think that, you know, he had a lot of ideas and ambitions and aspirations, and I think there was some disagreement and some frictions between him and the other developers, and I think maybe he got too difficult to work with after a while, but then again, that's just my theories. So my biggest disagreement with Mekkah regarding Tracia 776, it's about the implementation of some of its mechanics. I think that Tracia is a game that is very interesting. It's far from my favorite game in the series. I think that it's convoluted and overly complicated in many ways. I think that particularly fatigue and capturing are two mechanics that are just not very good. Mekkah seems to think that they are the best mechanics ever, and that, you know, Shuso Kaga is like this genius that can do no wrong and that he's amazing. Maybe I'm misrepresenting his arguments a little bit, but he certainly places Shuso Kaga up on a pedestal when it comes to game design. And I think that personally, Shuso Kaga, to me, he seemed like a bit of an accidental genius. He was certainly not afraid to experiment. He was very willing to evolve the series and try out new things, which I commend. But I think that he was the kind of guy that threw things against the wall, and he kind of saw what stuck, and if he liked something, he kept it. If he didn't like it, he scrapped it. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think that he did a bunch of mistakes, and he did a lot of poor decisions when it came to Tracia 776. And sometimes I'm a little bit tired of how Mekkah glorifies him like some sort of god when it comes to game design. Like he could do no wrong, and he's just perfect, and everything he did was genius. I don't think that at all. I think he had tons of flaws in his design philosophies. Capture in particular is a game mechanic that I just think is horrendous. I like the aesthetics of it. I like the fact that you're on the run from a strong enemy, and the only way you can really resupply is to capture enemy soldiers and take their gear. It really reinforces this feeling of panic and you know, being low on resources that Tracia conveys, and that's great. But I think how it's implemented in the game really slows it down to a crawl. It's very punishing on new players because they don't necessarily know how much they need to capture to get through it. With a guy like Mekkah, who's played Tracia a million times, he knows exactly what enemies to capture, where, why, and when, and he knows what characters can do it. But to a newer player, or someone who doesn't have a lot of experience with it, it can really be paralyzing. I remember Mr. Antonin sent me a message once, and he was like, fuck, I cannot play Tracia, because I feel like every time I kill an enemy, I'm losing out on gear, and I don't know what gear I need, and it's really hard for me to get past the first few chapters of this game. And I think that's a big flaw in the designs of capturing. I think that it really... It's good when you play the game a lot, but to newer players, I think it's very harsh. I think Tracia is very punishing on new players in general. I know that the reason why it's like that is because the game came with an instruction manual, which clearly outlined how to play the game. Chaz made a video on it, which was pretty enlightening. And when, of course, we emulate the game on a ROM, we don't get that instruction manual, so we have to go online to get advice. I think that the fact that Shuso Kaga it made players rely so much on the instructional manual when he designed the game just shows that it's a poorly designed game. I think that if you need players to go read it, like a physical guidebook to play your game, you're doing it wrong. I think that you should be able to teach the player through the game itself. Now, we can excuse Tracia, it's an old game. Some of these design philosophies didn't really exist back then, so I can sort of excuse Shuso Kaga these things, but I still think that objectively, if you look at Tracia today, I think that it has a bunch of mechanics in it that are just stupid. Missing with staves is dumb. Fatigue is dumb. Capturing, again, as we spoke about, is dumb. The fact that Leaf, if he escapes first, everyone gets captured, that's dumb. Putting the player in a jail and taking away all their gear without warning, that's dumb. There's some parts of the Monster Escape arc that are way too reliant on RNG. Yes, I know, Mekkah has figured out a way to get past it. He has perfected a strategy. It only took him like 20 IronMan runs. That's dumb. I think that, yeah, there's just follow-up pursuit, critical coefficient, weird mechanic. Why is it even in the game? Why do you need to multiply crit rates on secondary attacks? Doubling is already strong. Why do you need to make it even better? There's just... That's just the things I can think of at the top of my mind. I could probably make an entire video where I just complain about the various mechanics in Tracia 776 that I think are dumb, stupid, and weird, and I don't really know what Shazakaga was thinking about when he designed them. He was probably just trying shit out, and I think one of the reasons why he got kicked out, or why he left, was because I think he got very difficult to work with after a while. I think he had too many ideas, too crazy, too all over the place. If you actually go play Tearing Saga, I haven't played it that much myself, but I watched a Let's Play of it. It's just full of wonky ideas. I think that really shows what Kaga is like when he's unchained and unrestricted. He makes a game that is kind of cool and interesting, but also weird and full of stupid shit. That's what I mean when I say I think he's an accidental genius. Sometimes he does things that are really well. He's very good at storytelling. I'll give him that. Tracia has a wonderful story. He's very good at creating the aesthetic and emotion. He's very good at underlying a theme. Like, I'd love to have Kaga design a story in a modern Fire Emblem game. I think it'd be fucking fantastic. But as far as the design decisions that he makes, the mechanics that he implements in his games, I think that he is a little bit too crazy. Like, that's my opinion on him, and me and Mekkah really disagree about that. And I'm sorry if I'm misrepresenting Mekkah's opinions on Shazakaga. I don't necessarily think he places him on a pedestal and worships him as a god, but sometimes when I'm discussing with Mekkah, it sure feels like he's doing it. Because he's like, oh, Kaga's just a genius, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, nah, I don't really think he was. But of course, he is the initial creator of Fire Emblem, and that is automatically, worth respecting a lot, in my opinion. Like, I love Fire Emblem, so of course I love Shazakaga for creating Fire Emblem, but I don't think he is as great as some people claim he is. I think that he sort of achieved martyrdom, even though the guy's not dead. I think he is martyrified, if that's even a thing you can say. And I think you should be able to criticize these iconic legends of the past, even though a lot of the things that they did are still considered great today. That doesn't mean that they're these perfect beings which did no wrong. So the next question comes in from Helios1097, and he asks, would you rebuy the Fire Emblem games if Nintendo/Intelligent Systems made official ports of them onto PC? Hell yeah, I would. I mean, I already have to emulate most of their games on the PC in order to get footage, so hell yeah. That's an easy yes on me. I'd even pay a lot of money for them, honestly. I really hope that they'll actually port over some of the older games onto the Switch. I would definitely use the Switch then to play them instead of just emulating them on the PC. Because of course I have a capture card, which would make it a lot easier. So yeah, no, there's nothing really more to say. Fuck yes, please do it. Take my money. So the next question comes in from Zachman Gaming, and he asks, do you think Edelgard will be remembered as the best antagonist in the Fire Emblem series? No, I don't think so. I think Edelgard is probably one of the most polarizing villains we've had so far. I think a lot of people hate her, but they also hate her in sort of a bad way. You can hate someone in a good way. I think Arvis is hated in a good way. He's hated for the things he did, but people still think he's a universally good villain. I think with Edelgard, people are a lot more split 50-50. There's some people who really think she's a great character. Other people think she's stupid because she does things they don't like. I think we need Tree Houses to sort of get off its honeymoon so that we can actually look at the game objectively. It's still too new at this point. People are still too emotionally attached to this game. People are too emotionally attached to Edelgard. She has waifu status with so many, myself included. It's hard to really rate her objectively yet. I think that she's going to be remembered as a pretty good villain and a pretty good character. I think maybe a couple years from now, people will look back and they'll be like, yeah, Edelgard, she was a really good character. I don't think she is quite going to attain like the same status as Arvis did, as in terms of like how good of a villain she is, but I think she's certainly up there. They definitely delivered a really good villain to us, and yeah, I think overall she's going to be remembered pretty well. But she's also probably going to be hated a lot because, I don't know, people just really dislike Edelgard. there was a poll released on like the most disliked characters, I think, in Korea, and she rated #1, and she had twice as many votes as the second highest character on that poll. So she has really pissed off a lot of characters, and I think it's because a lot of people pick Blue Lions as their first house, and she's not really well represented in that game at all. I mean, don't get me wrong, I thought she was a great villain, but I think if you play Church Rat or Crimson Rouse first, I think you will have a better opinion on Edelgard as a whole. So the next question comes in from Anonymous, and yes, I did change my shirt. A lot of guys are going to comment on it. I had to go do something, I'm sorry. And he asks, when do you think fan service has gone too far? So, I think I've made it pretty clear that I don't mind fan service. In fact, I kind of like fan service. I think that, you know, as a guy who's very vocal about what he likes, especially in girls, I don't mind a little bit of fan service. I think it's healthy even for the community. It's nice to have some pretty ladies that the artists can draw, that we can all ogle a little bit, you know. Some exposed thighs, some waistlines, you know, a little bit of cleavage here and there. I think that's just good for a game, honestly. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't have the position of Mekkah where it's like, oh, fan service bad, blah, blah, blah. I think it's good. I think it's healthy. Honestly, I think Treehouses is a perfect example of classy fan service done right. I cannot think of one character in that game that I think crosses the line. The closest would probably be Manuela, but even her, she only has a lot of cleavage. I honestly don't think she crosses the line. A good example of trashy fan service that is going too far is Camilla. Not only just her atrocious panty window, which just looks bad, but her entire character is horrendous. I think that Fire Emblem, for the most part, keeps it classy. There's not really all that many characters in Fire Emblem that I feel crosses the line. But yeah, I think Camilla is just a good example of when fan service goes too far, honestly. Fan service doesn't only have to come in the form of sex appeal, though. There are certainly other kinds of fan service, such as a self-inserted avatar, and in this regard, Treehouses is certainly better than some of its predecessors, but definitely in there with its bad decision making. I think that avatars, the concept of avatars in itself is fan service, and it's bad fan service in my opinion. I do not need to put myself into a game in the form of an avatar. I think it takes away from the story. I think that Treehouses is good despite of Byleth, not because of him or her. And I think that just the inclusion of an avatar is just catering to an audience that honestly I don't think need catering to. I think if you badly want to see a self-insert of yourself in the game, I don't know, man. Like, it's not for me. It's not for me. I wish Byleth was not in Treehouses, or I just wish Byleth was not an avatar. I don't know. I think fan service is okay as long as it doesn't detract from the game. As long as when it starts to affect the game and it starts to take away from the game, I think these are things that you can look at. For example, Camilla's character is so bad that I feel like she actually detracts from Fates. I think that her being in that game takes away from it. I think Byleth, Chris, and Mark, the avatars, Robin, I think them being in the game actually takes away from the game. That's when fan service goes too far. Fan service should add to a game. It should not detract from it. So the next question comes in from Mark D, and he asks, "Hey Mangs, I was wondering how you and Mekkah got to know each other. Could you tell us about the background there? I think you two together are the best commentary duo on YouTube, and I'm interested in how it started." So, I first noticed Mekkah during his co-commentary on Don Don's Binding Blade playthrough, where he did a 0% playthrough, or 0% gross playthrough, where he basically LTC'd the game, kept everyone alive, and recruited everyone. And I thought I was good at Binding Blade, and I saw that Let's Play, and I was like, holy shit, like, I know nothing. And it was really humbling. I reached out to Don Don first. I think I asked him, I commented frequently on their videos, but I reached out to Don Don and I asked him, you know, if he wanted to do a video together with me, and he was sort of dismissive, was like, I don't think I have time for that, and he was sort of like, I could clearly tell he wasn't that interested in working with me, so I was like, okay, fine. Mekkah was a lot easier to get in contact with. I remember adding him on Skype. He did an appearance on one of my birthday streams, I remember. That was like the first time I was in a call with him. But how it all really began was with a great shitposting war, because I would make fun of Mekkah for his bad sound quality. I would also sort of make fun of Don Don for his bad video quality. I thought that their Binding Blade playthrough, it was really masterfully done, but it was recorded in like 240p, and it was not, like, sound-wise, it was not that good. And I made a little bit of fun of them for that, and I think that prompted Mekkah to make fun of me. He uploaded a video where he played FE7 and he like parodied my commentary. He was like, he swore a lot, he made a lot of lewd remarks, and he was basically just like making fun of me. I think the video is called Mangs Plays Fire Emblem. If you search for that, I think you can find it. I made a response video where I basically made fun of his Pitfall series, where I had like horrendous mic quality and I did like special effects in paint and stuff like that.
Back and forth, we made a couple of shitposting videos with each other until Mekkah reached out to me on Skype, back when we were still using that thing. And he was like, well, bring me onto your Fire Emblem 7 playthrough, because I was doing a remastered walkthrough of Fire Emblem 7 with the rankings. And yeah, we just started doing FE7 together, and that's sort of how it started. And after that, we've done multiple playthroughs together, and that's sort of how we met. I don't actually remember which one of us started making fun of the other via shitpost. I think it was Mekkah, but I might be wrong on that front. So yeah, no, that's how it happened. So the next question comes in from Anonymous, who asks, who's your favorite same-sex pairing? Don't say I don't have any. I don't know. I don't really have any. I'm sorry. Like, I don't know. Like, I guess with guys, there aren't really that many to pick from. I mean, Treehouse has received a lot of flack for only having like a few gay pairings. In Fates, I think we only had Core and X Niles for the only male pairings. It's not like we have a lot to choose from. If you want to go like fanfiction pairings, then I guess Ike X Soren is pretty popular. But yeah, among the guys, I really don't know, because there's so few. I don't really spend a lot of time thinking about these things. As far as, like, female x female, I don't know, like, Dorothea x Ingrid, I don't think that's an official pairing, because I think Ingrid rejects her, but it's, like, one of the only ones I kind of like. So, yeah, I'm sorry. These are not things I spend a lot of time thinking about. I'm sorry. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, that was all the questions that we had for now. When another Patreon Q&A comes out, I will be posting it on my Patreon page as well as on Discord, so definitely join there if you haven't already. Again, I am really grateful to all my wonderful Patreon supporters who keep supporting me month after month after month. I'm sorry for not making more Patreon exclusive content for you guys, but my mentality has always been that I want all my content to be available for free to everyone, and I don't want to put part of what I do behind the paywall. That's not my mentality. I want people who support me on Patreon to do it because they want to, because they, you know, feel like supporting me, not because they have to. So again, I'm really sorry to all the Patrons for not giving you more exclusive stuff, but you know, I want to dedicate all of my attention and focus on my main channel. But that doesn't mean I'm not grateful for what you do. I really am. To be honest, if this Patreon wasn't here, this channel probably wouldn't be here, because God knows YouTube is unreliable at best and they do a lot of stupid shit. And knowing that I have my Patreon that keeps me stable means the world to me. It means I can sleep easy, means I have more energy, means that, you know, I get less stressed out, which in turn means I can do this. And yeah, I just want to say thank you so much to all of you. It really means the world to me. I don't like words. I don't really know, you know, how to put it into words. I really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for your continued support, even though it's completely optional, even though you don't have to. It really means the world to me. So thank you. If you want to be a patron too, you can sign up at my Patreon page. I'll try to get one of these out again soon. Hopefully it won't be that long until next time. Until then, my name is Mangs. I shall see you guys next time. Bye bye.